hospital?
Serve the National Health Service!
Who's NHS?
Our NHS! Who likes Richard Branson?
No!
Hooray! Jeremy Corbyn! Hip hip hooray! Jeremy Corbyn! Hooray! Hooray! Oh, Jeremy Corbyn!
Right, we're doing another photos, everyone.
Yeah.
Put it at the back. Ready? 1,
I was on the list. I put in every week. It's very rare you get chosen. I couldn't believe it last week. I got a stroke. I am Jamie Oliver. Trying to get this past the show. You're not the...
Well, you're learning this game that sometimes it's something.
Yeah, you're right.
Are you ready? Yep.
Whose NHS?
Our NHS!
Whose hospital?
Our hospital!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Whose NHS?
Our NHS!
Whose hospital?
Our hospital!
Whose hospital?
Our hospital!
Whose NHS?
Our NHS!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Whose hospital?
Our hospital!
Whose NHS?
Our NHS!
Whose children's A&E?
Our children's A&E!
Whose children's A&E?
Our children's A&E!
Whose maternity services?
Our maternity services!
Whose stroke services?
Our stroke services!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Whose NHS?
Our NHS!
Whose hospital?
Our hospital!
Whose hospital?
Our hospital!
Whose NHS?
Our NHS!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Healthcare.
It's a right!
Healthcare.
It's a right! It's just really great to see everyone here from the South Hospital Campaign down in London. Those of you who came into PMQs will have seen the absolutely shocking response that I got from the Prime Minister when I asked her what was happening in our hospital, and she turned around and basically said that it was not due to her. So, she's only the Prime Minister, but it's nothing to do with the cuts, the privatisation, the fragmentation of the NHS. It's all up to local people. So when I did an interview this afternoon for BBC and Up North, they were saying, well, the Prime Minister said as well in her answer to you today, Emma, that the consultation was carried out appropriately, that clinicians were engaged. My answer to that is, how then has the campaign group had grounds to launch a judicial review, and how has our local authority been able to refer to the Secretary of State if all of those things were followed properly? So that is the answer. This hasn't been carried out properly from day one. We all know that. We've all fought really hard, and we're going to keep fighting. And the newscaster said to me this afternoon, do you think he's going to win this fight? And I said, hell yes, we are. We're going to keep going. So I think everyone has heard enough from me, though. So we've got Stephen. Where's he gone? Stephen Pepper.
Thanks, Emma and the board. We're going to congratulate you on getting this organised today. At that sort of distance, and Roger for all the work he's been doing on this campaign. The way through, you've had a good journey today, and you've got a good journey back, but it's nothing like the journey that you've had for the past 2 years with this campaign to protect services and local facilities that people value in our local area. So I take your cap off to you for being involved all of that time. And when we've seen that bogus consultation exercise all over the I think we knew what was going to happen. We predicted it. You know, we're seeing it with the Gerald Walking Centre, a successful NHS facility catering for 26,000 patients. Very popular, took the weight of local GP surgeries, etc. Came out with a consultation. We're seeing what happened. It was a waste of time. So when we're seeing this consultation process come out again, we said, why look in the crystal ball when you can read the book? And we weren't there. Because straight away they started stripping down services, running services down, transferring services. And then they came out with the so-called alliance, which apparently now is going into a merger. And I can tell you what it is, the way it's going, that merger, they're going to make it into a closure in some time to come, because they're stripping services to make South Tyneside Hospital unviable. And that's no good for South Tyneside local residents, and it's no good for Sunderland, because that weight is all going to go on the Sunderland waiting list. It's going to be more difficult to get into Sunderland Hospital, and it's going to make a worse service all around. All part of the Tory ideology to run the NHS down, get people fed up with the NHS, and get the private sector involved. If they say can improve the NHS, then eventually the escalator keeps going. But as Emma says, we ain't giving up, and we can't give up. We've got the local authority here on our side, because they've referred it to the Secretary of State. I'm delighted to see, after Emma's pushing all that time ago, and we've got local councillors here who've been pushing for that to happen. We've got in Parliament, we're seeing Emma's excellent question today, and you know, we'll keep it going, we'll keep the momentum going down here in Parliament. Then of course, most importantly, we've got this group, the local campaign, who local people look to give them hope, to make sure that we can keep the services. If we can't keep the services, we'll fight for the services, and we'll, because we're in the right, people are in the right, we've got the right side of the argument, and that's what we're doing in the end. So thanks for coming down. Great to see you, and I hope to see you the next, well, I hope to see you a lot.
Yeah, how to follow Emma and Stephen. I mean, just on behalf of the campaign, big thanks to you, Emma, and big thanks to you, Stephen Heather, for the wonderful work you've done down here, and also to the council, that scrutiny committee that referred here, and has given us all an excuse to come down here and make our views known in this hallowed parliament where decisions are taken. And so I think on behalf of the campaign, we thank you very much, and it's been extremely enjoyable as well as very important for our cause. I mean, I think the first thing to say is that the important thing about the campaign is, I know it's a very big Labour area in the North East, but the campaign embraces everyone, you know, in the North East, and in our area in particular, to fight to safeguard our health services, and that's a vital thing. And that's one of the things that Gemma and I have always tried to stick to, try to unite everyone, regardless of the different views and political opinions and so on, because everyone wants a future for society where we have guaranteed health services. We don't have to fight for them, actually, so that's really important. I mean, it's all been said, but it was interesting at the scrutiny committee yesterday. I think Audrey was there. To hear Matt Brown say that South Tyneside has been one of the best performing hospitals in the country. He kept saying this, and it was really ironic. He actually lists all the performances of the hospital as second to none, and in some cases first for its performance. Yet for 150,000 people in South Tyneside, they're having their hospital downgraded with all this success. And you know what the issues are, I won't go into them. But, you know, we're also facing another phase, which is they want to remove all other acute services, which Stephen alluded to, behind our A&E, such as trauma, emergency, orthopaedics, intensive care, initial heart procedures, and so on, which will mean the loss of these acute services will make the hospital an unviable service. And as Stephen said, First of all, it was alliance, don't mention merger, and when it was a takeover, and now it's a merger, don't mention closure. Well, it's always been don't mention closure, but we keep mentioning it. I mean, it's on our t-shirts, so they can't get away from that. But not only that, Sunderland is now, as you know, consulting on, Sunday launched a consultation on May 9th to close Washington, Bunning Hill and Horton Urgent Care Centre. And it just shows you that, I mean, just all the lies we're told about how they are trying to shift care into the community, yet you go to Palmer Hospital these days, where I worked for nearly 30 years, it's almost like a skeleton now. There's nothing there. This is how community health service is being treated. So this is reality, but the context is, as you know, what Emma just highlighted in her question, and brilliant that she came and saw her actually present that question. I'm sorry that many of you didn't get there. There was a good representative of the campaign to get in there and hear that. But her reply was quite interesting because it shows that the government is, as Emma says, is not upholding any responsibility for the healthcare. It's not us, it's the local health services, they make the decisions. But actually there's no local health authorities anymore. There's clinical commissioning groups, and they're in the pockets of the organisations which are operating in those areas, including private organisations. And as we've seen with Ken Bremner, when he told them, he instructed them in early 2016, you can't carry on the same way, when his trust was told, which is that their hospital would be unviable by March 2017 if they didn't do something. So the only thing they could do was to try and gobble up South Tyneside services, and that's what actually happened. So we have the alliance based on that, and a merger, not based on strengthening our health services, but a merger based on making cutbacks and actually retracting the service into Sunderland. And all those points that are being made are very true. And I think it has to be said that it's clear, not just in our area but across Northumberland. It was clear in the debate today. You have Huddersfield there talking about privatisation. It was clear that right across the spectrum, the health service is being deconstructed, and our district hospitals are being deconstructed. Even our GP services are being deconstructed, and that's all being swathes the population in the North East and across England. This is the agenda that's being further pursued. As we've said, the Council Joint Scrutiny Committee have said that with their referral to the Secretary of State, our consultant-led 24-hour children A&E are downgrading our full maternity services and our special care baby unit, and the loss of the hospital strokes are not in the best interest of health service in South Tyneside and Sunderland. That's brilliant. Our aim in coming here is to make everyone aware of our local health services and the need to be protected and guaranteed for the future. Everyone has the right to their health services in their locality and in their towns and cities. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Roger, on behalf of the campaign.
I'll just start by saying what a fantastic campaign that we've all ran. Ably led by Emma Lewell-Buck, Roger, Gemma, well done. I mean, an amazing campaign. I know I met with you sort of with Julie and Bridget here at the start, but the success that you've had, I think, is going to be an exemplar for others. And I know that it's not over yet. Obviously, you've still got there's a long way to go, because you can never count your chickens these days, can you? And I'm definitely going to be picking Emma's brains and yours over trying to save my 2 urgent care centres. You know, that was so that's my summer all planned out. There's 2 in my patch, there's 3. as you know, the Pallion and the 2 and 9 patch are Bunny Hill and the Washington one. Fantastic urgent care centres, beautiful new buildings. You know, that was the money that we wasted, remember? When we were in government, we wasted all that money. Well, we built things, and that's 3 of the things that we built that they're now saying are surplus, and they're going to have one in Pallion. So I've got 2 meetings lined up with David Gallagher from the CCG, and the worst part of it in a sense was that I got no prior notification. It was when constituents got in touch with me, so I don't know if any of you did or whether this is just how it works now. It was when a constituent got in touch with me about the urgent care centres closing and what was I going to do about it. And I'm thinking, is it? What's this? Couldn't believe it and thought it was becoming serious. You must have misunderstood. We've managed to find an email that had been sent sort of a few hours earlier from someone I'd never heard of. It wasn't from David Gallagher. It said, "Dear MP," it was just a round robin circular. So it hadn't sort of even been flagged as being anything urgent, but they'll be able to say that they'd let me know. So obviously we've jumped into action. I've been in touch with James Frith, MP for Fulbury, yeah, and he won. He saved his. There's another couple of MPs as well who've took on these battles and managed to save the urgent care centre. So he sent me his campaign packs through, and I'm literally just going to copy it. So anyone who, you know, I know you're busy enough with your own campaign, but any advice or help you've got on this, because it's just a slippery slope. You know, if you know anything about those areas around Bunny Hill, sort of in that part of Townend Farm, or where the Washington one is and where the one is in Horton, you know, they're not areas where people, you know, will be high car owners or have loads of money to spend on public transport. So to then say that they've all then got to travel, or we've been told there'll be more GPs, well, we know we haven't got enough GPs as it is. So where do people then end up? A&E. And that is just the worst of all worlds. I just can't see how there's any sense in it. Anyway, but I'm going to meet with him, no doubt he's going to tell me how this is going to be a good thing. And obviously I will beg to differ. But you've been there, you've done that, you're still doing the fight. It's been a fantastic campaign. All power to you. If it wasn't for, when you think, I know we always say it was Nye Bevan, but say it wasn't, to say it was probably somebody else. But you know, the famous quote that the NHS will last for as long as it's fought with the faith to fight for it. Well, that we've got a room full of those folk here today. So take my hat off to you. Thank you all so much. Keep up the good work with what you're doing, because you know if the NHS is going to last, it's going to be people like us all working together, from the community through to local politicians, through to national politicians, and taking that fight. And just saying, no, we're not going to lie down, we're not going to let this happen, it's our NHS. And it is our NHS, and hopefully it will still be our NHS in another 70 years' time. So if we're going to see that day for our grandchildren and their grandchildren, then we've got to keep on doing what we're doing. So I just want to thank you all.
Very happy to take them, so fill the chair.
All I would say is one of the difficult soldiers with Emma. Thank you so much for what you just said, because everybody in this room, I've got everybody battling for the 2 years, and it's probably going to get worse before it gets better. But those words of encouragement down here, and from Stephen and from Emma, I really rather shot me on, and for all the work that Mary and Roger and Gemma have done with yourself. It really is encouraging, and then if we can keep that back myself. I've just retired as a citizen, so and I cover the whole Houghton area. And I had to go there one day, and as Stephen said, when they pulled the plug on the Jarrow Walking Centre, increasingly it's just spreading like wildfire. We are more than just together. And when you look at some of them in particular at the minute, where the Tories are trying to push special measures for health, education, social, and everything else. I mean, the doctor joined in rapidly, so I think we can pass you.
Can because Caroline Lucas, when the only
I wasn't even going to use 3 minutes. All I wanted to do was to bring solidarity and support from the Green Party and to say we're absolutely 100% behind you in your campaign. I know the turnkeys are doing fantastic work, and we just want to be working with you and doing everything we can to try to save this hospital. And just to say a few words as well about the NHS reinstatement bill. I'm really hoping we can get that bill properly in Parliament this next time around. I know that it's now being championed by Emma Smith from Labour. And we just really need to have a different approach to health. So yes, let's try to do everything to save this hospital, but let's also try to save the NHS as well, which, as we know, is under massive attack. Privatisation, the whole Lansley bill and so forth, the Lansley Act rather now. And so trying to roll back that cherry picking, to roll back the privatisation, to make it a truly national health system again, is, I know, the aim of all of us. And I just simply wanted to say, thanks for being here, thanks for your campaigning, and let's hope that by working together we can not only save the hospital but do our very best to save the NHS too, because as you'll know, both are at serious risk. So that's what I wanted to do. Thank you.
I don't think I need to introduce John McDonnell. There's a good friend of mine in Stevens has agreed to just come and give us a few hard words before you get on your long coach journey back to South Tyneside to set off at 5 o'clock this morning. So they've had a long day. So John, I'll hand over to you because it's good enough from me.
I've been told you're the Tyneside Gardening Club, haven't you?
We'd like to be. We'd like to be.
How's it gone? All right, how's it been?
Excellent.
Okay, all right.
John, we're the anti-capitalist Tyneside.
That's what gets me into trouble. When she said in your Who's Who, you've got fomented the overthrow of capitalism, are you still doing it? Oh, bloody right. But let me just tell you where we're at. What's happening in your area is happening right the way around the country, as you know.
Yep.
And it's just scandalous. Every unit that's being closed at the moment, they argue that these are some rational plans to rationalise the overall service and improve it and all the rest. Exactly the same has happened in my area. They've shut A&E in Ealing, just down the road. Our A&E now, you can't get in for love nor money. In fact, last winter, the figures were 100,000 people were being treated in ambulances as a result of what was happening in A&E cutbacks. Then if you get into the hospital itself, you're on a trolley. And then if you are treated, it won't be within the 4-hour period, it'll be a lot longer than that. And for many, tragically, sometimes it's had a serious effect on their health. And then the big issue for us now as well is that even if you can get a bed in a hospital, getting out is the difficult part, because social care has collapsed as well. The latest figures on social care, there are 1 million people now not getting the care that they used to as a result of the cuts itself. And because they've privatised social care, 150 private providers last year went into administration. That's because of the cutbacks in terms of local government funding, so they can't pay the necessary fees to the companies themselves, sometimes which are exorbitant because they're trying to make profits. Then they go to the wall as a result. So just as in your area, we've got a crisis right the way across the country. And the key, what we've been trying to do, and it's exactly as you've done today, Ruth, so I'm really proud of you for doing really, is not let these people forget what's happening on the ground. Because when you go into that chamber, literally you think they must live in a different world from us. Well, they do. They do live in a different world because they'll use their private healthcare to look after themselves.
they'll need the NHS in an emergency. That's when they'll start panicking, but most of the time they won't bother. And it's interesting, a lot of Tory MPs now are coming under a lot of pressure from campaigns like this because of what's happening back in their constituencies. So for the first time, it's beginning to bite on them, really. So what I've been saying to people, and we've had wave after wave of people coming down here, is the work that you're doing on the ground, getting the message out, is absolutely key. It's absolutely key because it's pushing the Tories back a bit. But in addition to that, it's dividing them and demoralising them. Now, I don't know when the next general election will come. I think they're well, as soon as possible, really. But I think, I'll tell you, they'll cling on to office for as long as possible. But they're not in government. They're not in power because they're split in the cabinet. They're split God knows how many different ways. And the only reason Theresa May survived is because they can't agree upon a successor, basically. And so, you know, you have Liam Fox and Boris Johnson rowing with Philip Hammond, who's rowing with Gove and all that sort of thing. And everywhere you must probably notice that when you walk around this place, every darkened corner, there's a group of Tory MPs plotting against each other. So what's happening? She can't get anything through cabinet. On her back benches, there are people coming back saying, we've had enough of this, it's not working, the constituencies, they almost lost their seat last time. And then on top of that, any decision that she wants to make, she has to go to the DUP and ask for their permission, so they exercise a veto. So in the situation we're in now, we're on, well, today we've got 3 line whips because we're voting against them on our motion. But most days we're on 1 or 2 line whips, aren't we? Because they're in paralysis. They can't get anything through because the splits in cabinet, split on their backbenches and the DUP itself. Now, our job, therefore, is to try and push them over the edge as quickly as possible, and that's what we're trying to do. Oppose them on everything, absolutely oppose them on everything they bring forward, putting our own motions up on what should be done. Today it's the East Coast Line, today the rest of the debate is the NHS itself, to shame them as much as we possibly can, and try and get as much coverage as we possibly can. I think I'm a pessimist. I think they'll cling on. I think they'll cling on for as long as possible. But whenever that general election comes, that's where I come from a meeting on the general election campaign. Whenever it comes, we're ready for it, basically. And we're going to take them on. Throughout the summer, I'll come from the general election campaign, throughout the summer, we're going to be running an NHS campaign. Now, they're going to, the 70th anniversary of the NHS, of Labour founding the NHS, is coming up in July. A few weeks before that, they're going to make a bigger financial announcement about how they're going to fund the NHS for the future. We think it will be nowhere near enough. They'll dress it up as a huge announcement, saving it long-term funding and all the rest. We don't think it's going to be anywhere near enough. They might try and do enough to try and get them into a general election and get past it and hoodwink people, but we'll be exposing it, and we'll be exposing it all through the summer, because it isn't just the lack of funding now, it's the damage that they've done over recent years. And the other thing we'll be pointing out, even if they do put more money into it, it's going in and it's coming out the back door, straight into Branson's pocket and all the rest of it, you know. And the Jeremy and Prime Minister's question today, you must have saw, he was raising the privatisation of the NHS, and what we're seeing is the creeping privatisation, sector by sector. And it's right, it's invidious, it's right the way across the NHS itself. And I think what they're aiming for is a combination of cuts where they run it down, privatise as much as possible, and then a 5 or 10 year plan of basically wiping out altogether. So our job now is to do exactly what you're doing. I'm really pleased with what you're doing, it's fantastic. Expose what's going on, and then we'll present our alternative. And the alternative is straightforward. We end all privatisation. Finish. We kick out the privateers. No more PFIs, and we bring the PFIs back into public ownership and control. Outsourcing of staff and contracts, we bring them back in. And so we have democratic control again with the NHS. That's the first thing. The second thing, we fund it properly, so no more cuts. And we ensure that we fund it to a level that will provide the services, not just in the short term, but the long term, so it's stable for the rest of the time. Now, the choice people are saying how we're going to fund it and all the rest of it, straightforward. We did alongside the manifesto in the general election, we published what they call a grey book, so it was our alternative budget. And what we did is we said, basically, we can fund our public services if we have a fair taxation system. And what that means is that we said the top 5% are paying a bit more, rolling back the cuts to the corporations that they've done, not all of them, but most of them. The predictions we've got at the moment is corporation tax and the other cuts in taxation of the corporations of the rich is going to basically give away 70 billion to the rich and the corporations over the next 3 years. You roll that back, and then on top of that, Yeah, we are going to introduce some additional taxes. One of the additional taxes we said we'll introduce, some of you might have heard of it, a Tobin tax. It's a tax on speculators in the city. We introduced that. In fact, we got a guy from the city to actually design it, poacher term gamekeeper. And then on top of that, we said what we're going to do is crack down on tax evasion, tax avoidance. So basically the message is to the corporations, look, you're going to pay your taxes. And we're going to use the full force of the law to do that. And that means public registers. And the big one we're going for as well is the figures on the Panorama programme were, I think, underestimate. But they said £92 billion a year going through the City of London in money laundering, tax evasion, tax avoidance. And a lot of that is going into properties in this country owned by overseas companies. So we've forced the government now to bring forward proposals on a register of overseas companies' ownership of properties, and on that way we'll be able to tackle the tax evasion, tax avoidance. And we think those measures will enable us to actually invest in the public services, but in addition to that, invest in the economy. So you grow the economy, and in growing the economy you can then ensure you can fund the public services on a permanent basis. Now this isn't rocket science. It's what Labour governments have done from the start, and every time we've been into power, we've had to clean up the mess in the NHS that they've left us, and so that's what we'll be doing. They might come forward with putting a 1p on national insurance or something like that. We'll see. We'll see what they come forward on. If it is, it still won't be enough. So what we're saying, unless you get a fair taxation system, you'll never be able to afford the public services that we want in the NHS in particular. Okay. Let's say one final thing as well. I visit my local hospital on a regular basis. I meet the GP staff, ancillary work and all the rest of it in the local area as well. We can't be in a situation where, you know, after 8 years of austerity, you have to have nurses go to food banks to survive. There's been a 14% cut in the wages of nurses and others in the NHS. So the unions have done a good job. They've got a pay deal which tackles some of that, but goes nowhere near making up for what they've lost. So on top of all this, what we're saying is we'll fund the NHS, we'll end the privatisation, but never again will we allow the workers in the NHS to be exploited. Now, I don't know an NHS worker who doesn't work beyond their hours, to be honest. And I don't know any of them that aren't committed to the service itself and provide a good service. Now, again, what we're saying is decent pay awards. We're going to restore national collective bargaining so unions can negotiate again. And we'll make sure that there's a culture of respect built up again for NHS workers themselves. Part of that is how you manage those resources too. So what we're talking about is how we ensure to get the NHS back again, but also we make sure there's democratic involvement and engagement with local communities in any decisions that take place. So you don't have these decisions literally imposed from above about closures and supposed reorganisations that always result in cuts somehow. So that's our policies basically, right? We've been out there testing them on polling and all the rest of it, and actually, to be honest, it's overwhelming support for them. The Financial Times, they did a couple of weeks ago, one of the journalists contacted me and said, we're running a poll the next day. We've been doing polling on a whole range of individual policies, your tax policies, NHS funding, the nationalisations, etc. And they did polling, quantitative, so then they did qualitative polling, focus groups, etc. And these were focus groups. The guy said it was supposed to be with voters that are shifting voters, not Labour supporters. Actually, he said they were all bloody Tories together. If you look at our policies in terms of NHS and all that, it's something like 70 to 80% support. If you look at bringing water back into public ownership, 70 to 80%. Same with rail, same with energy, same with Royal Mail. They then published that in the Financial Times. Then they did the focus groups, but they never told them whose policies they were. So these Tories sat around and said, these are wonderful, they're absolutely fantastic. And I said, by the way, they're Labour policies. And again, I think when the next manifesto will be more radical than we were before. When we go out on the stomp in the next general election, whenever it comes, we're going to put the NHS right at the heart of it again. I think that'll help us not just get into government, but also get us to be able to implement the policies. Finally, the issue, winning the election is just the first step. But as you know as well as I do, when we go into government, they'll throw everything at us possible. So what we're saying to people, in all the campaigning that you're doing, in the local community, you start working up your plans for what you want, whether it's health or education or whatever, so that when we go into government and we want the implementation of the plans, it doesn't come down from above, it's done at the local level. And we've been saying to people time and time again, when we go into government, we all go into government. because we're not going to allow the establishment to dominate anymore and hand these policies down to us against our direct wishes or our interests. I always work round up by trying to explain to people a society that we want. People get bored with it, but it's true. We want a society that's radically fairer, radically more democratic, where we all have a say, radically more equal. We can't allow these grotesque levels of inequality. Particular levels of poverty. We've got 4 million children in poverty, 2/3 of them in families where people at work. Only 3 months ago, we had a homeless person die within feet of the doors of Parliament itself. We can't allow it to happen. So we base that on a prosperous economy, though, which is economically and both environmentally sustainable. But the issue for us, and this is the difference between us and everyone else, is where that prosperity is shared by everybody. Now, there's a word for that that wasn't used in the Labour Party for a period. It's called socialism. That's all it is.
I get called all the names under the sun. What are we going to do about the progress Tony Blair's arm of the Labour Party and the members of Parliament who have stabbed us in the back week after week, month after month? Are we going to get rid of them?
We win the argument, that's the first thing, that's the most important thing. We've got 550,000 members now, we're still growing. We win the argument, we make sure we mobilise those people. We're not into mandatory reselection or anything like that, but people will have the opportunity with trigger ballots to choose their candidates at the next election as normal. But actually, and I'll tell you what, in the Parliamentary Labour Party at the moment, I think it's working pretty well. I think most people want to get on with the job. We've got a tiny number of people who are just not satisfied, okay? I'm doing my best to kill them with kindness. It's completely against my nature. We're doing our best to involve them, argue the case and all the rest of it, and that's the way. But I think they're becoming a voice that is relatively minor within the party at the moment, and the more fuss they kick up, whether it's progress or whatever, the more people react against them. You know, people want a united party, and I think that manifesto in the last election, many of those people who were carping and all the rest of it, we've virtually doubled their manifesto, we've doubled their majorities. They were elected on huge majorities this time around. So I think it's just a matter of winning the argument all the time now. In terms of different groups, people will join different groups and things like that. The most important thing is to work in comradeship. And it's always us on the left, to be frank, who've worked in comradeship. When Jeremy and I were on the back benches and were arguing alternative, and Stephen were arguing alternative policy, we never did it in a personal way. It was a politics. This is what we believe in. Some of it is degenerated in personal attacks. We're trying to move beyond that.
Thank you very much.